Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petrick and Adrian Barzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Oh, good.
It's been a minute since we've actually recorded. My life has been rather hectic at the moment. Lots of school stuff that I had to take care of.
And you finished. You're alive. Congrats.
Yeah, we got our project completed. I had a group project in the class I'm taking, so anyone who's ever been in a school probably has an idea as to how a group project goes, and it's never according to plan. But, I had a bunch of stuff to take care of. I took care of it, but now I am back. I'm ready to, do
now,
this whole
Mike,
thing.
You weren't the kind of person who delegated tasks and then did them anyway, because that was my biggest problem with some group projects I had in college.
There were a handful of things that I did have to take care of after delegating them, but it was nothing too major. It wasn't like I was picking up like 2 full people's worth of work. It was kind of like
no. I just mean I was in a group project where we had a meeting and work was delegated, and I didn't do my stuff immediately, and so the other person who delegated it just decided to do it and then complained that I hadn't done anything.
No. The only work that I took over was stuff where people were struggling to take care of it and asked for some help. So there was some redistricting of work responsibilities, but
some gerrymandering of work.
yeah, I like that turn of phrase. All right, let's get into the upkeep. You've got a special announcement this week, which I think is pretty neat. It was an idea that you pitched to me, so I was proud of the initiative. But first, we were brought to you in part by Original Magic Card. Original Magic Card is a great online store. They have all sorts of tokens, dice bags, playmats, art prints from both the history of Magic and art history as a whole. There's a lot of really neat stuff that they've done, and I really do stand by their work. They've got neat products, and they also work directly with Magic artists who license their particular artwork. Like right now, they have an Ancient Carp playmat. If that card is really your jam, perhaps they also have a Solemn Simulacrum mats, which might be a little bit more generally popular, but they are constantly having new stuff come out and hit their website, and it's really neat. We stand by their products wholeheartedly, but the great news here, if you want and you're already in the checkout and you're about to buy these wonderful, wonderful art products, you can use our affiliate code. So if you type in, there's somewhere in the checkout process to put in a coupon code. If you use Commontary, all caps spelled is in the name of this show, you will get 5% off your order. We get a little bit of kickback, so you're helping keep the lights on here, and you're also getting a discount on some really, really nice art stuff. So
I'm going to blow your mind, Mike. Yeah. I just recently purchased my first order from Original Magic Art for tokens for my Boros stick.
Question, did you use our affiliate code?
I did, indeed. Don't worry, I'm not a total idiot. I can't remember the name of the first artist. There were some limited edition bird tokens. I got Ken Myers Jr., the Monarch token, which is the guy with the mask and all the butterflies. And then I got a Randy Gallegos clue token, which is the hand drawing the key out of the water.
Oh, that's right. They do also do the they do Magic artists custom tokens, which are pretty neat. But yeah, definitely. Again, that code is Commontary, all caps, spelled as is in the name of the show. And that'll get you 5% off your order. Pretty sweet deal. So, Adrian, what do you have for us this week in the announcements?
Well, we've updated the Patreon. We should probably change that line in the script here because we had it for a while. For just as little as $1 an episode, you can hear the full show, including the pre- and post shows, as well as getting access to our patron-exclusive Discord channel. Now, the announcement. I'm sweetening the deal a little bit here. We are currently at $89 an episode. My birthday is next month. I'll be turning 27 years old. And for my birthday, I would like nothing more than to hit $100 and meet our first stretch goal. 2 things will happen. The first, Mike and I will be financially obligated at that point to provide video portions to our set reviews. Okay, great. That's something that we never thought possible in our wildest dreams. So thank you, patrons. But the other thing that we're going to do is when we hit that goal, when, not if, we hit that goal, if we do it before my birthday, that is, we will be giving away a free color commentary playmat in a drawing to one of our patrons. So really hope y'all sign up. I'd love to give away that playmat. It would make me really happy. Happy birthday to me and all that. And you get a sweet playmat, or you have the potential, I should say, of getting a sweet playmat out of the deal.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Those I've seen those playmats in person. They look actually pretty sweet.
I own one because I'm vain as all hell.
Yeah, I do not, because I have one playmat, and why would I need another? But
you gotta hang them up on your wall, trophies of victories.
All right, that's fair. I will probably one day own one, and I'll just sign it myself.
For yourself. To Mike, from Mike.
Yeah, really double down on the full narcissism.
Hey, we've been covering a lot of words named after Greek people being tortured.
Yeah, our pre-show just had a discussion about Tantalus.
Yeah, and then just the other day, I feel like I was explaining Sisyphus to someone. It's been popping up a lot lately.
Huh. Funny how life works like that. All right.
Yeah.
Enough of the announcements. We got a sweet
Sisyphean announcements.
It feels like that at times. But this week we have a deck to talk about. It is a red-green aggro deck. And you found this one. How did you come across this little one?
I feel like someone posted it on Reddit, and I was just like, I can't believe a 2-color aggro deck 5-0'd at any point, let alone twice. So I said, you know what? That's the deck for this week.
Yeah, I mean, historically, 2-color aggros kind of struggled in Pauper as a format.
And it's because our mana base is not very good. But I think as we go through the list, the most notable exclusion is there are no Rugged Highlands in the deck. Aggro decks that want to play 1-drops do not also want to play tap lands. And I wonder if this deck gets a little bit better. No, there's too many creatures. I was thinking Get to Lava Runner might change the texture of this deck a little bit because this deck is at least a month old, but I don't think so.
Well, let's get into some of the cards here. And you were just talking about aggressive 1-drops, and let's start things off with the 2 copies of Frenzied Goblin. So there's a red mana for a 1/1. Whenever it attacks, you can pay a red. If you do, target creature can't block this turn. So a nice disruptive threat, if you will. It's not exactly, blowing anyone's socks off. It's a 1/1 for 1, but it does make it more difficult for your opponent to profitably interact with your attacks.
Yeah, so the only problem with this card, and it's something I didn't realize back when I first read it, is that you can only do this once.
I mean, that's given the state of like a lot of board states in Pauper, I don't think that's it certainly would be better if you could just dump mana into this thing and just, make sure that their entire team can't block, but I don't know. In the control matchups where you're just trying to get in for that last point of damage, there's not really that many creatures, and it is the fact that it does just make the creature unable to block. It's not just it can't block Frenzied Goblin. So I don't know. I still think it's pretty valuable.
Yeah. Following it up, we got Curd Ape, which is R for a 1/1. When a forest is in play, Curd Ape gets +1/+2. So essentially, it's a 1-mana 2/3. Hopefully, most of the time. Sometimes it's not though.
Yeah, I mean this is much more powerful in other formats where you have access to dual typed lands. It's I don't know if this has seen play in Legacy in the past 5 years, but I know that at some point there was a Legacy Zoo deck, and I know that in Modern for a long time there was a Zoo deck, but when you have typed duels, this can be a turn 1 2/3, whereas in this deck you're kind of not always guaranteed that.
Yeah. The next couple creatures I actually want to talk about in tandem, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
First up, we have 4 copies of Burning Tree Emissary, which is a great card. RG gets you a 2/2, which says add RG to your mana pool. So just to be clear, its mana cost is hybrid, so you can play either red or green. Other places we've seen this is in decks like Stompy or RDW, which can really only leverage one of the mana types. But in this deck, it slots in perfectly with the next couple of creatures here. We have 4 copies, for example, of Jund Hackblade, which is red and then hybrid green or black. So really, we're casting it for red-green. As long as you control another multicolored permanent, Jund Hackblade gets +1/+1 and has haste. So I could see a game where you go turn 1, whatever. Turn 2, Burning Tree Emissary, Jund Hackblade, attack for 5, right? Like that could happen with Curd Ape and Jund Hackblade. And I think that is where some of the strength of the deck lies. But we're not done. We also have Naya Hushblade, which is our WG. So, we're casting it for red-green again. As long as you control another multicolored permanent, Naya Hushblade gets +1/+1 and has Shroud. Now that's kind of whatever. I like the haste a little bit better. And then our final one is Rip Clan Crasher, which is RG for a 2/2 with haste. Sort of rounding that out is Mudbrawler Cohort. Whenever it gets +1/+1, as long as you control another red creature, it's a 1 and an R for a 1/1 with haste. So your turn 2 play is going to be very powerful if you can set it up with Burning Tree Emissary, which is what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, so it kind of... This deck is more than any other deck trying to leverage not only the mana produced by Burning Tree Emissary's ETB effect, but also take advantage of the fact that it is producing 2 colors of mana, because that was one of those things where once Stompy started playing this, you started to see a little bit more commonly the Vault Scourges in the main deck, because they can be cast off the red mana. Or in RDW, you started seeing like a lot of red and 1 mana cost, because that can still be played off of the mana generated by Burning Tree Emissary. This, however, is just going as deep as it can and just saying, like, let's play these weird things that, like, the fact that Jund Hackblade and Naya Hushblade can both be played off of Burning Tree Emissary's mana and also immediately then buff themselves because of the Burning Tree is a sweet little piece of interaction. Now, Rip Clan Crasher, I'm like kind of a little bit more lukewarm on, personally.
Yeah, because honestly, I don't know what the upside is over a card like Valley Dasher, which can be more reliably cast. Sure, Valley Dasher has to attack every turn, but if you're not attacking with Rip Clan Crasher, things have gone very wrong.
Yeah, this just kind of seems like one of those things. Like,
well, I will say that it does also, if you don't have the Burning Tree start, it does also pump Hackblade and Hushblade.
that is true. Like, it does give you a little bit of upside in that regard.
So maybe that's a pretty good reason to play the card. I don't know.
So yeah, it's a little tricky here, because like, looking at this list, my immediate impulse is to say, like, your starts where you can like just go Burning Tree Emissary into one of these like very specific 2-drops. I feel like you're in a pretty decent position, but the moment you start thinking about like the fail cases, right? Like, if you only see like 1 color of mana here, you're very, very quickly going to be in trouble if you don't have that Burning Tree Emissary. And even if you do, like, you get the Burning Tree into something else, and then you might still have stuff stranded in your hand. Now, there is one other creature in here. There's 2 copies of Goblin Heel Cutter, which is 3 and a red for a 3/2. And whenever it attacks, target creature can't block this turn, but it also has dash for 2 and a red. So you can cast it for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and at the end of turn, you return it to your hand.
I like this card. It's a top-end and aggressive creature red decks that serves its purpose very well. It's basically big Frenzied Goblin in this deck, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, it's just very efficient. Now, let me run something by you. So, both of us were a little bit lukewarm on the prospect of Rip Clan Crasher. How would you feel about swapping those over for Scab Clan Mauler? Are you familiar with this card?
No, tell me what it is.
Scab Clan Mauler, red and a green. It's a 1/1 with Bloodthirst 2 and Trample. So if you've gotten in for damage on turn 2, this thing is a 3/3 Trample for 2.
What's it called?
Scab Clan Mauler.
see it for myself.
So,
All right, I don't hate it. I think Rip Clan Crasher has the benefit of having haste, but 3/3 with trample is nothing to sneeze at, and also it's a berserker.
that is one of the greatest types in Magic, but I'm just thinking that it might be like Rip Clan Crasher. The haste is nice, but I'm just wondering if, again, like, it almost seems like Valley Dasher would be better in this slot outside of the slight synergy with the blades.
Well, if you don't have Rip Clan Crasher, you only have 12 of the multicolored. Well, we have some more multicolored permanents, but we'll talk about those in a second. We only have, 12 of the creatures that are multicolored. So I wonder. I don't know. I'd be interested. I'd be interested to see the numbers on this.
All right, let's move on to some of the spells, and maybe we can suss some stuff out here. 4 copies of Chain Lightning.
And Mike and I were discussing this before the show. I have no idea why the deck would run Chain Lightning over straight up Bolt.
So I actually have a quick little theory here. And it revolves around the fact that I don't know if you looked at this deck list and how much it costs online.
It's like $5.
It is like $5. That is.
I think that's a budget consideration. That's
looking online. Lightning bolts are about $1 online.
I mean, 4 cents versus $4. Sure. I mean, that would double the price of the deck. I could see that if we look at the sideboard, which we will. There's also no Pyroblasts or Gorilla Shamans, so sure, I'm willing to say that's a budget consideration on Mitgo.
Yeah, I have a feeling that this may be like something that someone put together to see like how cheaply they could put together a aggro deck that could potentially 5-0, which I think is, a neat experiment. But I think that these Chain Lightnings, I cannot see a reason to play these over a playset of Lightning Bolts if your budget allows for it.
People might try and say, well, you can chain the Chain Lightning, but I just don't think that argument holds very much water. When was the last time you actually Chain Lightning a Chain Lightning?
I have done it once.
Period. I feel like I've done it once also in Boros, and I think I killed my opponent with it. So I mean, there are definitely sweet spots, but I just overall don't think it's really like most people aren't going to chain this back, and then you have enough mana to chain it back on them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I've been in positions where I could chain it back, but then realize like, oh, my opponent will just do the exact same thing, and I'm just giving them card advantage.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely would consider swapping this out just for plain old Lightning Bolt, because that is a real downside. Next up, we have 4 of I know at least at one point modern playable card, Violent Outburst, which is 1 red and a green for an instant. It has Cascade, and it has some other text, but Cascade is the important bit here.
No, it's the other text is important too. Oh, sorry, go ahead though.
When you play the spell, remove cards from the top of your library from the game until you remove a non-land card that costs less than this spell. You may play it without paying its mana cost, and then you put all the cards you removed on the bottom of your library in a random order. Then it also gives all your creatures +1/+0 until end of turn.
Yeah, that is relevant in this deck. Pumping your team. The Cascade, I wonder how good it actually is. If you have to cast it pre-combat in order for it to matter with your haste creatures is my only concern. So I wonder if just straight up Trumpet Blast wouldn't be better because it pumps a little bit more. Although I guess this does get a card out of your deck, and it's not going to be Goblin Heel Cutter. It's not going to be another card we'll discuss in a second. But most of the cards in this deck are 2-drops.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to imagine like the best case scenario is you do this before combat and you hit either Jund Hackblade or Rip Clan Crasher, and because of how Cascade resolves, that creature will be on the battlefield by the time the actual spell resolves. Am I correct in that?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, I was under the impression that that's how Cascade works, because I believe it is actually a triggered ability of the card, not part of resolving it. So you actually will flip into something. So potentially it could like hitting Jund Hackblade, if you have a multicolored permanent, does mean that this represents 4 extra points of damage, bare minimum.
Yeah, so okay, we're on board with Cascade. The next card I'm not on board with. It's Firewild Border Post, which is one a red and a green for an artifact. So it's a multicolored artifact. It adds red or green to your mana pool and it comes up play tapped. Its special ability is that you can pay one and return a basic land you control to your hand rather than pay its cost. But honestly, I would rather just have Scab Clan Berserker. I feel like what am I doing with this weird mana rock?
You're turning on the Hackblade and Hushblade.
Well, yeah, but so would the other card, right? I guess you basically play this card for one.
I mean, so this
Works.
is kind of its replacement for Rugged Highlands, I guess. Like if you think about it, how this card functions when you play it, it's basically an ETB tapped land that also happens to enable the multicolor matters synergy with those 8 cards
that you have to play on turn. I guess you played on turn 1. You have to bounce a land back to your hand, though. I don't know. I guess
we'll think about it. How much different is that if you have a basic in your opener? How much different is that than playing a tap land?
I guess not really.
I mean, like, it does have the distinct downside of if your opponent has artifact removal, they can, get you with it. But I don't know. I don't think this is as bad as you perhaps think it is, just because it does help enable that specific synergy. It also helps you fix to actually cast those cards. Because, spoiler alert, there are not a lot of non-basics in this deck. Last non-land card here, Elephant Guide. 2 and a green, enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3. When it dies, put a 3/3 green elephant creature token onto the battlefield. What are your thoughts on this in this deck?
I think it's good. It gives the deck a little bit of reach and resilience that it might not otherwise have. An army of 2/2s is only so impressive, but if you can make it into a 5/5, it's much better.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the fact that even if it trades, you still get a 3/3 out of the deal is not the worst.
Yeah, I don't hate it. And like I said earlier, a lot of your cards cost 2 mana. So if you go turn 1, I don't know, Curd Ape, turn 2, Burning Tree, Hackblade, swing for 5, turn 3, Elephant Guide, that seems like the net draw for this deck.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being like a very difficult to deal with start for some of the slower decks in the format. And looking at the mana base, like, you can tell that this was built as an aggro deck because it is 4 Evolving Wilds, 5 Forests, 9 Mountains. Just real simple and to the point. And
yeah,
obviously
you can't really afford to play a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I just to take care of this, I don't think this is an Ash Barrens deck.
No, definitely not. Evolving Wilds is fine.
I think this is a deck that cannot afford to pay 1 mana to fetch a land, even though it is very color intensive and wants to hit its colors. I think that you're just better off playing the Evolving Wilds, so that you still have access to the mana. You still have access to the mana you had at the beginning of the turn, instead of having to go down a mana to go and get a basic. I mean, it's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other in my mind, but I definitely think there are situations where you'd rather just have the Evolving Wilds. So what are your thoughts on this deck as it pertains to Pauper? Because, like, multicolor aggro decks have been popular in other formats. You mentioned, I don't know if it was before the show or during the show, that there's a Rakdos aggro deck that's doing well in Standard. Like, what role do these decks play in Pauper, if any?
The problem is they're very fringe because they lack a lot of the, I think, power and cohesion of the top performers of the format. And notably, it's not running any of what I would consider to be one of the marquee mechanics. It's not a Gush deck. It's not a Monarch deck. It's not playing Tron. Like, it's really losing out on the powerful cards in the format. And I think that's what really makes the difference. It's also like Affinity gets to not be any of those things because Affinity just is dumb mana stuff still. So, it sort of cheats on that. And, Affinity's got the dumb mana stuff and the fact that it plays a ton of 4/4s for basically free. So I'll give it those two things. Affinity's also always kind of its own thing. But I think that's really what holds these decks back, is that they're not playing any of the actually strong cards in the game.
Yeah, and there's always kind of the argument of, like, why don't you just play Stompy? Like, it never has issues with its mana outside of just not drawing lands. Like if you draw the right amount of lands, it doesn't matter what lands they are because they're all going to be forests. And it has slightly more explosiveness. Like Burning Tree Emissary into Nest Invader is a lot less immediately impactful than Burning Tree Emissary into Jund Hackblade, for example. Like that's just a free 3 points of damage out of nowhere and an extra 2/2. It's absolutely silly. But looking at this, like you're sacrificing a small percentage, I feel, on just losing to your opener versus having slightly more explosiveness. Like I don't know, it doesn't feel to me like Stompy really loses out on the fact that like it has to wait a turn to attack, but this deck does lose out based on simply sometimes drawing hands that are never going anywhere. And also looking at the sideboard I am very deeply questioning of.
Yeah, why don't you start us off, because it's a weird board.
Yeah, there's a lot of readers in this one. So we've got 2 Blazing Volley, which is red for a sorcery. It deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. I think this card is actively bad, and I think you should not play it.
It begs the question, why are you not just playing Electrickery? I don't think budget's a concern there. I think it's legitimately because some people think that R for this effect is better than it being an instant. And I think it's wrong, but that's the only reasoning I can see.
Yeah, the ability to cast this on your opponent's turn, for example, against elves, is potentially really major, because being able to wait for the moment where they kind of go shields down and get them with it is pretty big. Although I guess in this deck it's pretty suspicious if you go into your opponent's turn leaving 2 mana up.
I also... Oh man, what was I going to say? I was going to say something about... I don't think Stompy really has a good time beating elves either, but maybe having access to red makes you a little bit better because you have Chain Lightning in this card.
That's true. You do get actual removal. Speaking of removal, there's 2 copies of Flame Slash. Red for a sorcery, deals 4 damage to target creature.
Now, this used to be played in the Goblin deck sideboard, so it's not really that crazy. Yeah, I don't think Flame Slash is really that nuts. It's a good card. It gets rid of a blocker. This deck is all about getting rid of blockers, right? Like it needs to.
More specifically, it gets rid of blockers that your creatures do not outpace. Like,
yeah,
nothing in this deck without outside assistance gets to be big enough to deal with a 4 toughness creature. So, your opponent having a Mnemonic Wall or a Mirror Enforcer or any of those things could just stonewall you for a bit. And like, sure, you can Chain Lightning at second main, but like you're putting yourself in a position where you'd rather just have the better removal spell. So I think Flame Slash makes sense here. Next, we have 2 copies Natural State. I actually do like this. It's green for an instant, destroy an artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 3 or less. This is a 1 mana Stone Rain against Affinity.
It's also... Excuse me. It's also a catch-all against some of the problematic enchantments in the meta. Journey to Nowhere, other stuff.
Also, it hits Prophetic Prisms against Tron.
Yeah, it's in general like a fine sideboard card that I see in decks.
Then we've got 2 copies of Riverboa, 1 and a green for a 2/1. Island Walk, won't pay a green, regenerate it. This has long been a favorite of green decks as a option to deal with Delver. Delver just doesn't always have a great time dealing with this thing if you can stick it.
And now things are going to start to get weird.
2 copies of Tangle, 1 and a green. Prevent all combat damage to be dealt this turn. Each attacking creature doesn't untap during its next untap step. Like, I kind of get this. Like, you're the aggro deck. Like, snapping one of these off if your opponent's also an aggro deck does buy you a good chunk of time, just in terms of not only does it fog your opponent if they had lethal or close to it, the creatures don't untap for a whole turn, so it could potentially get in 2 full attacks against your opponent. That said, like, I don't know, this feels funky to me.
A fog in an aggro deck is very funky.
Then we've got 2 copies Mark of Mutiny, which is 2 and a red for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on it and untap it. That creature gains haste until end of turn.
Now, if you had a way of sacrificing the creature, I would hate it less. As is, you better be winning with this.
I mean, I don't hate this as like a win now thing, like especially against like decks that are hoping to just kind of resolve a Gurmag Angler. This feels like it could be fine there because just stealing one of your only creatures and swinging with it as a 6/6 definitely puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. That said, like any time that you don't manage to get to lethal on your opponent, this is miserable. This is actively helping your opponent. I don't know. I don't care for this. And then 3 copies Pulse of Marasa, 2 and a green, return target creature or land from your graveyard to your hand, gain 6 life. So I guess my thing about this is I'm not sure what this sideboard is actually telling us this deck wants to do.
Right. And most notably, it's missing some very powerful cards. For example, there's no Ancient Grudge, no Gorilla Shaman, no Pyroblast.
And it's not playing like, I don't know.
It's not a transformative sideboard, is I think what you're trying to say.
No, it's not a transformative sideboard, and like the cards that it is playing are not markedly better. Again, I'm not sure if this deck is silly in terms of how little it costs online, and I wonder if this was someone trying to, see, can I get to a 5/0 with a $5 deck? And if that's the case, then like I do understand that aspect of it. But it just doesn't seem like this is optimal sideboard tech. I don't know. It just strikes me as kind of odd. So if you were looking at this deck and you wanted to retool it, what would some easy changes you think be?
We've already discussed one. Maybe putting a Lightning Bolt over Chain Lightning. I would include Electrickery over Blazing Volley. I would take out the Tangles and the Pulses and find some better red-green sideboard cards. We've kind of already got artifacts a little covered. I could see maybe putting in a Grudge and a Shaman. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of other good red cards that aren't. I definitely Pyroblast. I'm trying to think of ones I haven't mentioned.
Let me hit you with some spicy tech that I just happened to find. How do we feel about Horned Kavu? Red and a green for a 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, return a red or green creature you control to its owner's hand.
What would you play that instead of? Because I actually like that quite a bit. I'm a little surprised it's not playing that card, because what you could do is play Horned Kavu and replay. You could play Burning Tree Emissary, No, you can't do it all on the same turn.
I think that's the line. Like, Burning Tree Emissary into this thing, bounce the Burning Tree Emissary, do it again next turn.
Yeah.
But then this over Naya Hushblade.
Oh. Naya Hushblade's kind of the outlier here, where it doesn't really. I don't know. It's just kind of weird.
It's a 3/2 Shroud. Like, that is its best state. This thing's a 3/4. Like, yes, it dies to an edict. Like, yes, your opponent can interact with it a little bit more easily, but it's always a 3/4. Like, you don't get that situation where like your opponent goes to blocks, I don't know, disfigures something, and all of a sudden like your Hushblade's dying as well because you lost your only other multicolored permanent. Like,
yeah, it makes 4 is no longer a safe number because of Blast and Scred, but it definitely makes blocking creatures a lot better.
Yeah, I think it just it represents a slightly different axis that you could attack on. Also, I'm gonna pull out one of my favorite bad cards, Giant Baiting.
Mike, quick, give me cards I have to look up.
Two, and then a hybrid red-green sorcery. Create a 4/4 red and green giant warrior creature token with haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step, and it has Conspire. So absolutely everything in this deck can be tapped for that Conspire cost. And the reality of it is a pump spell. It's not actually making creatures, it's a pump spell.
Well, it makes 2 4/4s.
It makes 2 4/4s, but if you're conspiring it, you're tapping down 2 creatures. So it basically is 3 mana, turn 2 of your creatures into 4/4s with haste.
I don't hate it.
I don't know. It's just stuff that I found browsing through the red green color identity on Scryfall here. It's just, oh, here you go, Tin Street Hooligan. There's a perfectly fine like sideboard card for this deck. 1 in red, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, if green was spent to play it, destroy an artifact.
That actually fits really, really well with this deck's overall strategy too.
Like it's a reasonably efficient body for the cost, and it has this all optional ETB thing. Like I think that's a fine sideboard card for this deck.
It's a piker that blows something up.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is I'm a little confused as to what this deck wants to do, and I think like obviously we're seeing like 2 5-0s with it, and I think I kind of get why this may not have seen repeated success, and I think it points to an underlying issue of these 2-color aggro decks are just always either a turn slow or a little shaky on the mana base. It's one or the other. And I have to admire like the deck brewer for kind of trying to figure out like how can I most optimally get value out of the mana generated by Burning Tree Emissary, but I'm not sure if the payload here is worth going into 2 colors. Thoughts?
I agree with you. I think if you think these cards are cool and you want to play them, the deck looks fun. You know, you could take it to F&M and probably do just fine. Moto's a different story, though. We already have established aggro archetypes there, and Boros just eats these kinds of decks alive.
Yeah, Boros does pretty well against these. I imagine that like any sort of deck that can put up like a modicum of resistance to a wave of 2/2s is gonna be fine. Like you got a decent chunk of 2/2s in here. Augur of Bolus kind of makes this deck have a hard time getting through for damage sometimes.
I'm sure the Delver matchup is very difficult. A lot of targets for Spell Stutter, Hydroblast. You mentioned Augur, but also Scred and Bolt will do just fine without too much setup. Specifically Scred without too much setup.
For reference, there is a grand total of 4 cards in the main deck that can't be targeted by Hydroblast successfully. And out of the board, I see two cards that might come in that matchup for maybe a grand total of 6 cards that they can't just Hydroblast. Which
You're talking about Riverboa, right?
I'm talking about Riverboa, yeah. Like that just seems really rough. Like I've got to imagine like one of the worst case scenarios is just like, I don't know, you go to like border post turn 1 and they blow that up with a Hydroblast. Like again, 1 mana Stone Rain. I see what this deck is trying to do, and I guess what I kind of want to posit to you is what would it take for a deck in this vein, like a red-green aggro deck, or even just a 2-color aggro deck in general, to kind of hum a little bit more. And I'm going to give you one more restriction. You don't get to say better lands.
That was going to be my first one. I sort of understood that is, not happening. I think that if you were, look at it as a Delver. That's what I'm going to go with here. It's a base blue deck that happens to run very powerful red spells. That's how you make it work. You are basically 1 color, and then you splash for other extremely powerful colors. Is it Delver just has the luxury of being blue, which is why it's so much better at it than other decks, because you have so many cantrips, you have synergy with Brainstorm and your fetches, and you really only need like 2 red sources in the entire deck to make it work. So that is really, I think, the secret to bad mana bases making successful 2-color more aggressive strategies like this. And yes, I know Delver can grind out the long game, but I think it's primarily an aggressive deck. People can probably quibble with me over that if they want. Aggro control, what have you. But at the end of the day, because it has access to all those blue spells also, I think makes it much stronger. You could take a look at no. Really, it's because blue and red are the 2 strongest colors in the format also, I think, is part of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like this deck is jumping through hoops to try and mimic Delver of Secrets, and Delver of Secrets has just such a low ask for you. Like, oh, you have to be the blue deck that plays instants and sorceries. Like, okay, sure. Like we can do that. That's fine. Whereas this is like, all right, so like in the best case scenario, you're going to turn 2 get like a 3/2 with haste.
That being said, I think this is one of the better red-green aggressive builds I've seen.
Okay. I mean, we haven't seen one for a while. I know we covered one ages ago that ran
landfall
some
deck.
ran some funky landfall synergy, and I really like that as a plan, especially because like it was not falling into the trap of like, hey, let's play Wild Nacatl. Instead, it was just like running reasonable threats and then getting, sweet tricks like Harrow to like double trigger every landfall trigger that you have available to you. But this deck, like the peak of your tricks is I'm going to cascade into something with Violent Outburst. And if it's a creature, which it likely is, I'm going to want to cast this first main. So it just kind of puts you in this really awkward position of like, you have this combat trick that buffs your whole team, but you really don't want to play it during combat sometimes. Like, I'm sure there's times where it's just like, all right, like, I don't actually care about the cascade here. I just care about the, 3-4 extra points of damage. And sure, it's fine in those situations as a combat trick, but I don't know. This just seems like a good thought experiment that didn't have like a proper solution to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah, I just think like if there were more efficient red-green threats, like if there was a better payoff for being able to like hit red-green on turn 2, and I'm not sure how much better it could get at common, like that's potentially somewhere where this would shine. So I guess until we go back to Alara or in theory Ravnica, it just seems to me like
the return to the return of Ravnica.
I mean, they told us that there would be returns this year, so yeah, who knows? Maybe.
Shrug.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like this deck, if you want to play it online, go for it. Like this deck costs less than a league entry. It costs less than it costs to sign up for Magic Online. It's a silly cheap deck, like in terms of how incredibly cheap it is. In paper, this is a $42 deck.
It's because of Chain Lightning.
So Chain Lightning's account for 20 of that. The 2 copies of Tangle account for $13 of that. What
Tangle.
the hell?
And speaking of other funny, expensive cards in paper, Circular Logic is a $6 card.
Yep, I did actually see that the other day. Those uncommons that have never seen a common printing but are proper legal are always going up. All right, so this deck, any sort of closing thoughts on it? Because I do have one other thing I'd like to talk about today.
No, I think you should go ahead and say it because it's sort of. I think I've said my piece on it.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So have you seen that there's been a slight mishap at the printing factory again for Wizards?
Am I gonna click this? I'm gonna click this.
So some M19 cards.
Oh,
so
I've seen these cards. Yeah, let's talk about them.
For folks who haven't heard, core sets are returning. I know that they left us for a while, but Wizards has decided.
I'm a fan.
I like the core sets. It's a great place for them to do reprints of cards that Standard needs. And ever since they moved away from the model of like core sets are only reprints, like they never print like really super powerful things in these sets at common, but it's always interesting to see what's going on. Was there anything out of this that caught your eye?
I mean, they're all kind of interesting. Goblin Motivator is okay.
Motivator. Oh god,
yeah.
There's 2 goblins in this already.
It gives it haste. Like that's okay. It itself doesn't have haste though. I'm not really a big fan. Goblin Instigator, I don't really like. It's basically dragon fodder. So like it's okay, but it's no Mog War Marshal. Sure Strike, whatever, it's a reprint. Tormenting Voice reprint. Anake Ogre is not good enough. Cinder Catalyst Elemental is interesting, but I don't know. I mean, maybe you could make an argument for One Land Spy.
I don't know enough about how One Land Spy works. So Catalyst Elemental, for those who have not seen these, is 2 and a red for a 2/2. You can sacrifice it to add 2 red to your mana pool. I don't know enough about that deck to say definitively if
It's just like mana that can be used on another turn, but like it costs 3. I'm not really that impressed with it, so I'm decidedly meh on these spoilers.
Yeah, these are like very core setty spoilers. Like a lot of these are reprints of like there's a bunch of vanilla creatures here, and I don't know. Like we've gotten a strictly better Suntail Hawk. There's Rustwing Falcon, which is one white for a 1/2 with flying.
Oh, there's more. I didn't click more.
Oh, actually, Gearsmith Prodigy.
Now,
Gearsmith Prodigy is a blue for a creature human artificer. It's a 1/2, and it gets +1/+0 as long as you control an artifact.
I'm not impressed by that. What are you gonna play that in?
I have no idea, but I like it. Like we've over the years we've slowly been like getting this like blue X artifacts theme repeated over and over, and I feel like at some point we are going to hit a critical density of these, and there's going to be a deck there. I don't know what it looks like. It's probably blue black. Like this, you play like this, like Dund Operative.
The problem with these cards is you have to actually play artifacts, and neither of those cards are artifacts.
Neither of those cards are artifacts, but like you play your lands. I don't know. You play like. I'm desperately trying to pull something here. Like maybe you play a small Trinket Mage package. You're already in blue. Help me here, please.
You can play Artificer's Epiphany, and this new blue card, Scholar of Stars. 3 and a blue gets you a 3/2 and enters the battlefield if you control an artifact, draw a card. Also, you could play Gearseeker Serpent. I don't know, Mike.
Yeah, like again, like it's one of those things where there's not enough support for this deck to exist right now, but it's one of those things where maybe over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, it just slowly enough of this filters in. You know, we got another couple artifact theme sets. We get a couple artifact themes cards here and there, and eventually, like, there's something approaching a deck. But yeah, these spoilers are like very, very middle of the road in my mind. There's nothing here that like blows me away. I do like the fact that like Wizards has in Dominaria and now this set kind of flirted with the idea of common cards that are 2/2s for 1 mana that instead of having a drawback require you to jump through a hoop to get there. Like this and Gearsmith Prodigy and Gitu Lavamancer both fill me with hope for like efficient common creatures.
And then maybe you'll have your 2-colored aggro deck.
Yeah, maybe you will. Like I like most of the 2 power creatures for 1 mana that we have right now either come with a downside or require some hoop jumping. So I just feel like this is a good sign for aggro decks that aren't just stompy, or red deck wins or that style of deck. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see if this is a trend that continues, or if these are just like 2 minorly connected cards that came out in 2 consecutive sets. Also of note, they swapped back to a better way of handling the colors on the rarity. I'm very excited about this, Adrian.
Do you mean because the set symbol isn't white?
Yeah, I think people were being a little over dramatic when they were talking about like the Dominaria set symbols, but like it was a little confusing. There were definitely like I definitely had to correct multiple people and be like, hey, this is not a common. That's an uncommon. Please. There's a U at the bottom of it. But I don't know. I'm like aggressively lukewarm on this set as to what we've seen so far. But hopefully, who knows? Maybe we get another Topin Freeblade, a card that we all wished was good, but turned out to not be. So
yeah, that one was a little disappointing.
It was real good in draft, and then everyone realized that Lightning Bolt exists in Pauper, and its stock fell dramatically. All right. Well, if we've gotten our quick insta takes out of the way for that, do you have anything else that you'd love to let our listeners know about, or do you want to take us out of the show here, Adrian?
I'll take us out. Thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought with the support of our patrons. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Special shout out to Fizzled. Thank you so much. Check below this video in the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you if they've listened to us on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS, Pat's Games, and Mike's LGS at JP Comics. And of course, L. You can find our theme song, Quantitative, and other great tracks over on his SoundCloud, soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.